Warning, F-bombs are armed and may be dropped. I want to start by apologizing for my rant from Sunday. Um, I was mad. All right. I was mad because I fell for a lie. The Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that, before that, there had been a video on Facebook. The title was something like Proof of Systemic Harassment of George Floyd, and tried to depict the first 30 seconds of the body cam video as having been uh, um, for a prior DUI arrest. That's not what it was. It was the day of the arrest where George died. Okay. The protests about his death happened 4 hours after he died. I heard about it 5, 6, maybe hours after it happened. The protests had already started. Now, my understanding is these protests were very ugly and nasty and not very nice, but they weren't the violent ones. The violent riots would be just the next day, right? Rigor mortis had barely finished running through when the first violent riots began. And it just kept getting worse and worse from there. Now we've seen cities burned literally to the ground. All right. I've been through Paradise, California, because I grew up not far from there, and I had to come back to help my old man with a prior fire. So as we toured the city of Paradise, we saw just how serious the devastation was. Minneapolis right now makes Paradise look really, actually, pretty good shape. All right, other than the body count, because Paradise killed 89 people. But the structural devastation, Minneapolis is about 10 times worse, and that was actually one of the smaller riots. Do y'all realize how serious this was? And here's the lie. The police murdered George Floyd. Derek Chauvin specifically murdered George Floyd. All right? He didn't. That's what didn't happen. And those lies started less than 4 hours after George died. Now, George is dead. This is true. All right. And that is unfortunate. Whether it's his choices in life or not, doesn't matter so much as who is not responsible for his death, and that's Derek Chauvin. And people have since died over this lie. David Dorn is very dead over this lie. And it's not actually over yet. And that's even worse. The lie has been exposed. 2 plus 2 equaled 4, not 5. And yet the lie of 2 plus 2 equals 5 is continuing. Why? We now know what really happened in that arrest. And yes, it's unfortunate. Right? George Floyd is dead, and that is quite unfortunate. But it wasn't murder. Those of you who've been saying murder since then need to stop and start thinking about it. Some of y'all get a benefit of the doubt. Some of y'all don't. Some of y'all have a history of lying about this subject. You don't deserve a benefit of the doubt. And that's the truth, whether you like it or not. Now, was Derek there when George died? Yeah. But I was there when my dog died, and I didn't kill her. All right? Paramedics are there all the time when people die. Paramedics didn't kill anybody, and sure as hell didn't murder anybody, but the guy died anyways. All right? Just because you're there when somebody dies doesn't mean you murdered them. And even if you are the reason they died, that isn't murder either. I'm going to go one step further. Everybody knows that I have a theory that Iran created the coronavirus to create this crisis that we're going through. Everybody also knows that I believe the Iranian regime is a death cult. All right? I find it really kind of curious how many people tied with Black Lives Matter also have ties to Iran. Sean King has ties to pro-Iranian groups in the United States. George Soros has ties to pro-Iranian groups that actually have ties directly to Iran. It strikes me as very interesting how close that pattern seems to be repeating. How many of those roads you think they lead to China, and they do, but well before they get there, there's this nice little off-ramp to Iran. And Iran has its own roads to China. Here's my prediction for next year. Not this year, next year. Well, I'll start with this year. November, Donnie wins again. It's not going to be the McGovern Reagan, I believe it was, landslide where it was one state, literally. They carried the one candidate and everybody else voted for the other guy. But it's going to be pretty bad, like 35-40 to 10-15. And the 10-15 will not include California anymore, by the way, but will be the really so blue they're almost black states. New York, maybe Florida. By early January 2021, it's going to slowly start coming out that certain county clerks are going to be resigning under unusual circumstances. They were just reelected, and month two maybe into their new term, and they're resigning for health reasons. It's slowly going to start coming out from Congress specifically that people are starting to look at Iran and ask those questions. Well, why does George Soros have ties basically straight to Iran? That's kind of curious. Why is Iran having this very strange coronavirus pandemic when they shouldn't be having any at all by rights? Maybe a dozen people affected, and yet here they are having a couple thousand dead that they're acknowledging. Really strong questions are going to start coming out over the next year about um, questionable voting, about voting irregularities, about who has ties to what country, Iran specifically, about why did these riots start basically within 12 hours of the death. You watch, you see. And right about the time those questions start really ramping up, you're going to see another set of riots. And these are just going to be blatant, orange man bad protests. That's where they're going to start. And they're going to turn into buildings being burned again, stores being looted again. Even if the squadristry do not actively engage in the looting, they're going to actively engage in the arson. That is my prediction for not later than May or June of 2021. Keep calm and manage to carry on.